My name is Frank Bidart, and I'm here to introduce Robert Lowell. One day in Mr. Lowell's class, someone brought in a poem about a particularly painful and ugly subject. A student who was shocked said that some subjects simply couldn't be dealt with in poems. I've never forgotten Mr. Lowell's reply. He said, "You can say anything in a poem if you place it properly." I think that this is one of the reasons one can't think about literature in the 20th century without thinking about the work of Robert Lowell. He has stayed alive as a poet by never drawing a line around what a poem can or should be. Again and again, his style has changed in an attempt to deal with intractable, unfashionable, or intolerable subject matter. He has kept his poetry close to the intuitions, concerns, obsessions that dominate his mind. Many of us would be terrified to face or write the record of our lives. He says at the end of The Dolphin, "My eyes have seen what my hand did." Last December, the United States First Circuit Court of Appeals, in upholding Judge Garrity's Boston school desegregation decision, wrote, "While Boston is unique in some of its traditions, demographic profile, and style, its uniqueness cannot exempt it from complying with a national policy forged long ago and laboriously implemented throughout the land." The poet Robert Lowell wrote of the Beacon Hill statue commemorating the young white Colonel Shaw and our first black regiment, commissioned in 1863, "Their monument sticks like a fishbone in the city's throat," unquote. I think I am not alone in feeling that, personally and as a nation, one way we have come to understand ourselves is by reading Robert Lowell.
Thank you. It's a good send-off. Well, I'm very happy about Frank Bidart's introduction. I mean, that he took the pains to make it, and because it's very hard to get someone to read poetry with very seriously, sort of line by line, or even more minutely than that. And since Randall Durrell, the poet, died, and since I've been seeing him, there's no one I've talked over poetry with more than Frank Bidart. You wouldn't guess maybe from its introduction the sensitive care he gives every line. Now, what I'm going to do is read for about 15 minutes, and maybe if one's voice carries here, answer a few questions. The easiest thing to do seems to do it more or less by time, that start with the poems earliest listed in my books and come up to the unpublished. That's what I'll do. In this light, I can read the poems, but not the notes on which poem I'm to read. Talking about something too terrible to write and whether you can write about it, or almost harder now is to have something outrageously hopeful that you believe in and to find a way you can place that. It's very happy endings, happy things are quite difficult really to make convincing. I don't think I have too many in the poems I'm reading. This first one's called In the Cage. The Cage is a federal jail, and I spent 5.5 months in one during the war as a CO. I think the hardest working people in the jail were a colored group called Israelites. But they sort of redid their own food, and they had an air of strength and mystery. And I don't know why they were in jail exactly. They believed in Armageddon or something and didn't believe the Second World War was that. In the Cage. The lifers file into the hall according to their houses, twos of laundered denim. On the wall a colored fairy tinkles blues and titters by the balustrade. Canaries beat their bars and scream. We come from tunnels where the spade, pickaxe, and hod for plaster steam in mud and insulation. Here the Bible twisting Israelite fasts for his Harlem. It is night, and it is vanity, and age blackens the heart of Adam. Fear, the yellow chirper beaks his cage. It's sort of like school being in jail if it's a decent jail, and only easier. I can't claim to have been in the worst jail. Now, this is one, it's called Mr. Edwards and the Spider. And you should think of it as a sermon, perhaps, except that it's in rather elaborate quatrains. And it's spoken by Jonathan Edwards, and it's spoken to his congregation, who rather got tired of this kind of hellfire sermon and finally exiled him. But he was the, I suppose he was the great American mind before Franklin, before Jefferson. It was another era just before the Revolution. He was very precocious, Edwards, and as a boy of something like 12, wrote a treatise on spiders, which didn't have very much theology in it. It maybe helped not to. And he just observed these spiders floating in the air, sort of fuzzy and nice, and sun shining on them and at their ease. And then he figured this was part of Providence, that as they floated in the air, they'd be blown into the Atlantic Ocean. And there they'd be destroyed, otherwise they'd overrun the earth. And so that satisfied divine justice. Edwards was actually a very lithe and attractive man in many ways. I don't think I've brought that out in this poem. He's meant to be terrifying here. And in his later sermons, he also came back to spiders. There they were allegorical and rather abstract, as a symbol of evil or the sinner being burned in everlastingly. I saw the spiders marching through the air, swimming from tree to tree that mildewed day in latter August when the hay came creaking to the barn. But where the wind is westerly, where gnarled November makes the spiders fly into the apparitions of the sky, they purpose nothing but their ease and die, urgently beating east to sunrise in the sea. What are we in the hands of the great God? It was in vain you set up thorn and briar in battle array against the fire and treason crackling in your blood. For the wild thorns grow tame and will do nothing to oppose the flame. Your lacerations tell the losing game you play against a sickness past your cure. How will the hands be strong? How will the heart endure? A very little thing, a little worm, or hourglass blazoned spider, it is said, can kill a tiger. Will the dead hold up his mirror and affirm against the four winds the smell and flash of his authority? It's well if God, who holds you to the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider, will destroy, baffle, and dissipate your soul. As a small boy on Windsor Marsh, I saw the spider die when thrown into the bowels of fierce fire. There's no long struggle, no desire to get up on its feet and fly. It stretches out its feet and dies. This is the sinner's last retreat. Yes, and no strength exerted on the heat then sinews the abolished will, when sick and full of burning it'll whistle on a brick. But who can plumb the sinking of that soul? Brother, oh brother, picture yourself cast into a brick kiln where the blast fans your quick vitals to a coal. If measured by a glass, how long would it seem burning? Let there pass a minute, 10 trillion, but the blaze is infinite, eternal. This is death, to die and know it. This is the Black Widow, death. The Black Widow, of course, is a spider, and it's a nice expression anyway for other things. Can you hear back there? You can, no? Not very well. Now, which of these things is my small? This one. I wonder if it came up a bit, be better. Can we do anything about this? I feel if this could be lifted, maybe.
I don't think it can.
Yeah, well, now look, if I talk into it, am I more audible? Yeah.
Better if you put it here.
All right, let's see if we can perilous balance. Let's see. Am I still more audible? No. No, this doesn't work up here. I don't know. I don't know what happened. Now, I'm almost inaudible this way. No. This is quite good. All right. Okay, we're as good as we can do, I think. A fatal question for me to ask. Sorry for that juggling. If you've ever gone to a reading of a chapter from a novel or a short story, you'll in many ways find it much more pleasant than poetry readings because you can understand what's being read. And there are two reasons for that. It's hard to write a short story unless you're just sort of wildly experimental and perhaps disastrously so, that doesn't have a narrative and a style that's rather unrhetorical, rather like someone talking. Now, it's hard for various reasons for poems to get to that state, and this poem is the nearest to that, I think. It's a grown man's remembrance of the time when he was 4 or 5, and his uncle was dying of Hodgkin's disease, and you didn't quite know what was happening in the house. And you think of a country house and a rather sheltered little boy, and the uncle very clean and nice looking, but something was wrong. I was a grandfather's boy, I guess. It's different from a mother's boy, and a sort of lax, generous stiffness. He brought me up large in the country, until I outgrew him at 7. I had other interests, became introverted, and all the evils of time, yes. My last afternoon with Uncle Devereux, Winslow. And the little boy says, he's on a porch, and the porch is being repaired, and the little piles of black earth and white earth stay in his memory afterward. I won't go with you. I want to stay with Grandpa. That's how I threw cold water on my mother and father's watery martini pipe dreams at Sunday dinner. Fontainebleau, Mattapoisett, Puget Sound. Nowhere was anywhere after a summer at my grandfather's farm. Diamond-pointed, athirst and Norman, its alley of poplars paraded from grandmother's rose garden to a scary stand of virgin pine, scrub, and paths forever pioneering. One afternoon in 1922, I sat on the stone porch looking through screens as black-grained as drifting coal. Talkie-talk, talkie-talk, clumped our Alpine Edwardian cuckoo clock. It was slung with strangled wooden game. Our farmer was cementing a root house under the hill. One of my hands was cool on a pile of black earth, the other warm on a pile of lime. All about me were the works of my grandfather's hands. Snapshots of his Liberty Bell silver mine, his high school at Stuttgart am Neckar. Stogie brown beams, fool's gold nuggets, octagonal red tiles, sweaty with a secret dank, crummy with ant's tail. A rocky mountain chaise long, its legs shellacked saplings. A pastel pale huckleberry fin, fished with a broom straw in a basin hollowed out of a millstone. Like my grandfather, the decor was manly, comfortable, overbearing, disproportioned. What were those sunflowers? Pumpkins floating shoulder high. It was the sunset on Sadie and Nellie, bearing pitchers of iced tea, oranges, lemons, mint, and peppermints, and the jug of shandygaff, which Grandpa made by blending half and half yeasty, wheezing, homemade sarsaparilla with beer. The farm, entitled Chardessay in the Social Register, was named for my grandfather's children, Charlotte, Devereux, and Sarah. No one had died there in my lifetime. Only Cinder, our Scotty puppy, paralyzed from gobbling toads. She did that. I sat mixing black earth and lime. A short section now. I was 5 1/2. My formal pearl gray shorts had been worn for 3 minutes. My perfection was the Olympian poise of my models in the imperishable autumn display windows of Rogers Pete's Boys Store below the State House. Distorting drops of water pinpricked my face in the basin's mirror. I was a stuffed toucan with a bibulous, multicolored beak. Another short section. Up in the air, by the Lakeview window in the billiards room, lurid in the doldrums of the sunset hour, my great-aunt Sarah was learning Samson and Delilah. She thundered on the keyboard of her dummy piano with gauze curtains like a boudoir table, accordion-like yet soundless. It had been bought to spare the nerves of my grandmother. Tone deaf, quick as a cricket, now needing a fourth for auction, and casting a thirsty eye on Aunt Sarah, risen like the phoenix from her bed of troublesome snacks and Talknick's classics. Talknitz or Tauchnitz classics were sort of paper-bound books ages before they had paper-bound books that you could get the wisdom of the world in. 40 years earlier, 20, auburn-headed, grasshopper notes of genius. Family gossip, says Aunt Sarah, tilted her archaic Athenian nose and jilted an aster. Each morning she practiced on the grand piano at Symphony Hall, death-like in the off-season summer. Its naked Greek statues draped with purple like the saints in Holy Week. On the recital day, she failed to appear. I picked with a clean fingernail at the blue anchor on my sailor blouse, washed white as a spinnaker. What in the world was I wishing? A sail-colored horse browsing in the bulrushes, a fluff of the west wind puffing my blouse, kiting me over our 7 chimneys, troubling the waters. As small as sapphires were the ponds, Quittacus, Snippatuit, and Assawampsit halved by the island, where my uncle's duck blind floated in a barrage of smoke clouds. Double-barreled shotguns stuck out like bundles of baby crowbars. A single sculler in a camouflage kayak was quacking to the decoys. At the cabin between the waters, the nearest windows were already boarded. Uncle Devereux was closing camp for the winter. As if poised for the engagement photograph, he was wearing his severe war uniform of a volunteer Canadian officer. Daylight from the doorway riddled his student posters, tacked helter-skelter on the walls as raw as a boardwalk. Mr. Punch, a watermelon in hockey tights, was tossing off a decanter of scotch. La Belle France, in a red and blue toga, was accepting the arm of her protector, the ingenue and porcine Edward VII. The pre-war music bells had goose necks, glorious signatures, beauty molds, and coils of hair like rooster tails. The finest poster was 2 or 3 young men in khaki kilts being bushwhacked on the veldt. They were almost life-sized. My uncle was dying at 29. "You're behaving like children," said my grandfather when my uncle and aunt left their 3 baby daughters and sailed for Europe on a last honeymoon. Near me was the white measuring floor my grandfather had penciled with my uncle's heights. In 1911, he had stopped growing at just 6 feet. While I sat on the tiles and dug at the anchor on my sailor blouse, Uncle Devereux stood behind me. He was as brushed as Bidart, our riding horse. His face was putty, his blue coat and white trousers grew sharper and straighter. His coat was a blue jay's tail. His trousers were solid cream from the top of the bottle. He was animated, hierarchical, like a ginger snap man in a clothes press. He was dying of the incurable Hodgkin's disease. My hands were warm, then cool, on the piles of earth and lime, a black pile and a white pile. Come winter, Uncle Devereux would blend to the one color. this is the year before this, and perhaps years to come, in a way have been very good years for writers teaching at Harvard. I think there have never been so many at once, and the most distinguished, oldest is Elizabeth Bishop. And there's been Peter Taylor, the story writer and poet, and his wife, and Octavio Paz, of course. And somehow you don't get that many in one place. And this poem is, it was written years ago, and it's to Miss Bishop. And long before I did, she discovered how to get sort of natural language into a poem. And once you get natural language, you want to get something else in, some sort of artifice, I think, to make the thing not sloppy. This is, yeah, this is very ingenious. The second line rhymes with the fourth. But there's no scansion, and the rhymes are a little sloppy at times, I think. Stuck and rock rhyme, and island rhymes with hands. But it's the story of two people being together a short time on the northern coast in Maine, where the water is very voluptuous almost until you try to swim in it, and it's very cold, and you get out as quick as you can. It's a period of sort of rest up. And then the two people go off in their separate ways. Water. Water must be a symbol, but I forget what it is. It's so much everything. The eternal and the nothing. Water. It was a Maine lobster town. Each morning boatloads of hands pushed off for granite quarries on the islands and left dozens of bleak white frame houses stuck like oyster shells on a hill of rock. And below us, the sea lapped the raw little matchstick mazes of a weir where the fish for bait were trapped. Remember? I sat on a slab of rock. From this distance in time, it seems the color of iris rotting and turning purpler. But it was only the usual gray rock turning the usual green when drenched by the sea. The sea drenched the rock at our feet all day and kept tearing away flake after flake. One night, you dreamed you were a mermaid clinging to a wharf pile and trying to pull off the barnacles with your hands. We wished our two souls might return like gulls to the rock. In the end, the water was too cold for us. I couldn't possibly get a glass of water. I'm drying up like the rock that isn't in the water. That's it. Don't have to have the water to go on. This poem is called Eye and Tooth. It's written in much the same meter as the last poem, and quatrains with rhymes and no scansion. And it comes out of a moment when I made the folly of getting contact lenses. And I was going off to the country, and they worked beautifully, and you saw more, and you looked 10 years younger, and you everything, a much wider field of vision than wearing glasses. But they were absolutely murder in a city in New York, and things would get under them, and you'd get the thing out, and you'd lose the lens and scar your glasses. And I did that twice, and the second time spent 2 days in bed, I think, recovering from the gash. The eye is an organ of knowledge, of seeing things, seeing what is, what really exists. And the myth of Tiresias, who saw Diana naked, comes into this poem glancingly. And he was turned blind, and then he warned Oedipus vainly about the future. I think there's nothing else obscure in this. I'm looking for obscurity. It's very hard, though. But you know, any poem, even Mother Goose, is obscure read aloud, I think. Oh, this isn't obscure, though, but iron tooth naturally means a very brutal order, law by force. A rough iron sort of world. Iron tooth. My whole eye was sunset red. The old cut cornea throbbed. You're laughing at my agony. I saw things darkly as through an unwashed goldfish globe. I lay all day on my bed. I chain smoked through the night, learning to flinch at the flash of the matchlight. Outside, the summer rain, a simmer of rot and renewal, fell in pinpricks. Even new life is fuel. My eyes throb. Nothing can dislodge the house with my first tooth, noosed in a knot on the doorknob. Nothing can dislodge the triangular blotch of rot on the red roof, a cedar hedge or the shade of a hedge. No ease from the eye of the sharp-shinned hawk on the bird book, in the bird book there, with reddish-brown buffalo hair on its shanks, one ascetic talon clasping the abstract imperial sky. It says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. No ease for the boy at the keyhole, his telescope, when the women's white bodies flashed in the bathroom. Young, my eyes began to fail. Nothing. No oil for the eye, nothing to pour on those waters or flames. I'm tired. Everyone's tired of my turmoil. You know, reviewers aren't perfect. Almost. And if you leave an unguarded spot, they pick on that. And when this book was published, I got very tired of rather hostile reviewers saying, we're tired of your turmoil too. And then even for the next book, they got it renewed, this line. It's not a soul-piercing statement. It's a moment of weariness after having suffered from contact lenses. This is a poem that's just a bit political, not exactly a political poem. And it's about Washington, and it's Washington 2 months from now, and almost much hotter than Cambridge will be in 2 months, if that could be. And At such a time, you think of Washington as an almost tropical city, somewhere in South America, with it's built in rings with statues in the center of the ring, and I think that's always been ornamental, but it was built so you could put guns at the head of the ring and shoot down rioters. And they're like the spokes of the wheel. There's another image stretching to the ends of the earth. Well, things have gone so badly with this country that it's hard to make much of a point by saying so. But it'll doubtless recover. But it seemed even then disintegrating, and this is I think it's a poem about disintegration, really. The other thing I might point out that Washington, the people you tend to see if you're there for a short time, are people who are also there for a short time. They've been elected to office, or they're working for someone who has been elected to office. It's a city of transients. It's a very beautiful city in some ways. July in Washington. The stiff spokes of this wheel touch the sore spots of the earth. On the Potomac, swan-white power launches keep breasting the sulphurous wave. Otters slide and dive and slick back their hair. Raccoons clean their meat in the creek. On the circles, green statues ride like South American liberators above the breathing vegetation. Prongs and spearheads of some equatorial backland that might inherit the globe. The elect, the elected. They come here bright as dimes and die disheveled and soft. We cannot name their names or number their dates, circle on circle like rings on a tree. But we wish the river had another shore, some further range of delectable mountains, distant hills powdered blue as a girl's eyelid. It seems the least little shove would land us there, that only the slightest repugnance of our bodies we no longer control could drag us back. This is a poem called Near the Ocean, and it's also the title poem of a book. You're the narrator. It's not altogether autobiographical, though it draws from experience, but rather directly sometimes, but it's mainly a symbolic poem. The speaker wakes up in an almost an atmosphere of Greek tragedy, of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon and Perseus and the Gorgon, fierce sort of man and woman thing. And then it's sort of reminiscence about this man's whole life, different places he's been and different people he's known, different girls he's known, and he ends up with his wife. And the poem ends up with his wife. When I say the house is filled, of course it could be where the man's living, or it could be the theater. The theater in his imagination, he's in bed. Near the ocean. The house is filled. The last heart throb thrills through her flesh. The hero stands stunned by the applauding hands and lifts her once head to please the mob. No, young and starry-eyed, the brother and sister wait before their mother, old iron bruises, powder. Child, these breasts. He knows, and if she's killed, his treadmill heart will never rest, his wet mouth pressed to some slack breast, or shifting back upon his back. The severed radiance filters back, a thirst for nightlife. The Gorgon head fished up from the Aegean dead, with all its stranded snakes uncoiled, he'll lie beheaded and despoiled. We hear the ocean. Betrayals. Was it the first night they stood against a black and white inland New England backdrop? No dogs there, horse or hunter, only frogs chirring from the dark trees and swamps. Elms watching like extinguished lamps. Knee-high hedges of black sheep encircling them at every step. About 4 of these scenes. Some subway green, cold water flat, its walls tattooed with neon light, then high delirious squalor, food burned down with vodka, menstrual blood caking the covers when they woke to the dry, childless Sunday walk, saw cars on Brooklyn Bridge descend through steel and coal dust to Land's End. Was it years later when they met, and summer's coarse last quarter drought had dried the hard-veined elms to bark, lying like people out of work, dead, sober, cured, recovered on the downslope of some gritty green, all access barred with broken glass, and dehydration browned the grass. Is it this shore? Their eyes worn white as moons from hitting bottom. Night, the sand fleas scissoring their feet, the sand bed cooling to concrete, one borrowed blanket lights of cars shining down at them like stars. Sand built the lost Atlantis. Sand, Atlantic Ocean, condoms, sand. Sleep, sleep. The ocean, grinding stones, can only break the present tense. Nothing will age, nothing will last, or take corruption from the past. A hand, your hand then, I'm afraid to touch the crisp hair on your head. Monster loved for what you are, till time that buries us lay bare. I made an error reading. I said only break the present tense. It should be the ocean can only speak the present tense. It has no past or future. It doesn't change much. This poem is called Will Not Come Back, and it's adapted from the Spanish poet Becker, who lived in the first part of the 19th century. I've made it into a sonnet, but in Spanish it's in 4 stanzas. So that inevitably it's rather different from the original, but its virtue comes from Becker, one of the greatest Spanish poets. It's this thought, it's good for this time of year, that it's the time of the lover, and there'll be other lovers next year and on to the end of time. But this particular pair, in the particular setting, even though all that will be reproduced, there'll be more swallows, there'll be more flowers and so forth, this particular moment will never come back. That's the title, the will not come back. And the man is speaking. Dark swallows will doubtless come back, killing the injudicious night flies with a clack of the beak. But these that stopped full flight to see your beauty and my good fortune, as if they knew our names, they'll not come back. The thick lemony honeysuckle climbing from the earth root to your window will open more beautiful blossoms to the evening. But these, like dewdrops trembling, shining, falling, the tears of day, they'll not come back. Some other love will sound his fireword for you and wake your heart, perhaps from its cool sleep. But silent, absorbed, and on his knees, as men adore God at the altar, as I love you, don't blind yourself. You'll not be loved like that. Now, this is a poem I'll leave out. It's about a turtle, and I'll just read one of the two poems. One, you catch the turtle, and the second poem, you find you can't live with them. Where do you put him? How do you feed him? And you put him in the bathtub, and the bathroom becomes uninhabitable, and the turtle's not happy. And it's a poem about releasing a captive. The setting is Maine, and the turtle is a turtle and also stands for the captive symbolically. Weeks hitting the road, one fasting in the bathtub, raw hamburger mossing in the watery stoppage, the room drenched with musk like kerosene. No one shaved, and only the turtle washed. He was so beautiful when we flipped him over, greens, reds, yellows, fringed of the faded savage. The last Sioux, that's the Indian, old and worn, saying with weariness, "Why doesn't the great white father put his red children on wheels and move us as he will?" We drove to the Orland River and watched the turtle rush for water like rushing into marriage, swimming in uncontaminated joy. Lovely the flies that fed that sleazy surface, a turtle looking back at us and blinking. I like to think it was this hall, but it was another Harvard hall where a friend of mine put a suitcase on the rostrum. And the suitcase was well filled with poems he was revising. And he could have read till the next sunset. I've just got a very few here, 3 poems. This is a poem from my son who was 2.5 when I wrote it. I don't think there's anything to explain here. We only live between before we are and what we were. In the lost negative, you exist, a smile, a cipher, an old-fashioned face in an old-fashioned hat. 3 ages in a flash, the same child in the same picture. He, I, you, chock-a-block, one stamp, like mother's wedding silver. Gnome, fish, brute cherubic force. We could see clearly, and all the same things before the glass was hurt. Past 50, we learned with surprise and a sense of suicidal absolution that what we intended and failed could never have happened and must be done better. This is called In the Ward. It's a dramatic monologue, but the kind where you sort of speak into the other person and you sort of read his thoughts and what he's feeling. It's a friend of mine, close friend, who had a stroke and later died last year. And the ward is like the ward. I mean, it has other people very sick in it. This man was a composer, and obviously a composer who wrote difficult music for the few. In the ward, 10 years older in an hour, I see your face smile. Your mouth is stepped on without bruising. You are very frightened by the ward. Your companions were chosen for age. You are the youngest and sham flirt with the nurse. Your chief thought is scheming the elaborate surprise of your escape. Being old in good times is worse than being young in the worst. 5 days on this grill, this mattress, over nothing. The wisdom of this sickness is piously physical, ripping up memory to find your future. Old beauties, old masters who lost their friends before they lost their minds. The child says, "Here your days are dark and the night is light. Heaven is a big house with lots of water and flowers. You go in a trunk. Your feet are wired above your head. If you could hear the glaring light bulbs sing your old modernist classics, they're for a lost audience. In your last year of buoyant unrest, you gathered 2 or 3 young friends in the champagne room of your cold water flat. Art is ruthless. To expose the arbitrary zero of Schoenberg, born when music was still a science. His ever-retreating borderlands of being that could not console. If you keep cutting your losses, you have no loss to cut. Nothing you see now can mean anything. Your will is fixed on the light bulb, its blinding impassivity withholding disquiet, the art of the possible that art abhors. Is an illusion, death or technique can wring the truth from us like water? What helpless paperishness if vocation is only shouting what we will? Somewhere your spirit led the highest life. All places matched with that place come to nothing. I'll read one last poem. This, too, is a portrait, more of a portrait than the last. It's about an old man, a fictitious old man who grows grapes and is famous for making wines. And he goes to dinners and drinks a lot of his produce. And he feels very young, and he looks for girls, and then he gets sleepy. He's very old. That's nice and sinister. Very moral poem. The title may be too tricky to read aloud. It's An Ear of Corn, and I suppose it's a private reference in a way, but nothing seems to show age so much as vegetables rotting, particularly an ear of rather greenish corn turning brown, you see. That's what happens to us. I'll read it. An ear of corn. At the head of his table, the wine baron is old like Stravinsky. There's green on the bread. The beautiful girls he knew are old maids or dead. He is drunk on his own wine. Hundreds of servants fill 14 glasses in chronological vintages to incantations of the price. And he says, "It's a sacrilege for me to say it. They mustn't hear me. The best drink is a rum banana daiquiri." He is not lacking in love. Someone's young wife is on his right. He talks again. Have you ever returned to a childhood house and found it unchanged? It makes one so angry. It's so shrunk, one wishes it wiped out. If it is wiped out, that, of course, is another kind of catastrophe. The girl hears, soon feels maternal. His eyes never leave her lips. She can't exercise his hallucination. He can bribe or stare a girl he wants into orgasm. He fills her ear with his old sexual gramophone. Like belief, he makes nothing happen. He or she is a stream, one of the bubbles, one of the sparks that flashed from the miscellaneous dish he gobbled. Her face is delicate and disgusted, as if she had been robbed, raped, repudiated by her mother. A discarded ear of corn lying by the sink, leaf and corn silk flipped back to show the golden kernels are brown. His first image of the girl who refused. His great lethargy calms him. Hypnos and Hudor, sleep and water. He no longer asks that she love him. Is this the substance hoped for? After a grasshopper life of profit, to stand shaking on fine green legs, to meet the second overflowering of Eros, himself younger in each young face, to see in that mirror a water without the life of water, a face maturing to less generosity than it had. And that's